Hi everyone, welcome back to Race to the White House Election Forecast 2024. In this video, we're going to take a look at fundamentals. So fundamentals are one of the four mainstays of my election forecast model, and in this video, we're going to take a look at how they work and why they are important. Then we're going to take a look at some states, and we're going to see how the states are projected to vote entirely on fundamentals. That is to say, based on, for example, ethnicity score, education score, urban population score, and other factors. So, first of all, let's start to saying why fundamentals are important. Fundamentals are important mainly for two reasons. The first of all is that in the United States election, we don't always have accurate polls on state levels. For this reason, really, when we look at fundamentals, we can project how our state is trending and really how the state of the race is in a certain state without taking much into account polls or even other voting trends. So this is like a preliminary analysis on the election. Of course, we need to take into account even polls, voting trends, and other contingent problems because, of course, election prediction is a big and complex matter. But fundamentals are really the building block of all the models and all the predictions. So, what are fundamentals? Fundamentals are divided right here, as you can see right now, in four main categories. The categories that we are looking at in this video will be ethnicity score right here, as you can see here in a few seconds, the ethnicity score, a society score, an education score, and an economy score. So let's start with the ethnicity score. For the ethnicity score, really, we need to take at the really demographic makeup of a state. So as you can see here, as you know, it's not for generalization, but it's really what happens in elections. White people tend to vote more Republican, while non-white people like Latino and Black and also other population, for example Asian population, tend to vote more Democrat. Of course, not with the same shares. The most democratic group right here is the Black population, right? The Black population is a really Democrat stronghold. And as you can see right now, CNN carried out an exit poll in 2020 when the race was between President Biden and former President Trump. And what the exit poll found out was really that Trump won the white vote by a whopping 17 margin. It won really 58% of the white vote. While Biden really made a killing with black people, he carried them with a margin of 87%, Latino with 67%. Again, he trounced Trump with this category, and with Asian population, he won them with 61%, and he even won with other racial and ethnic groups. So the really important thing here is that even though black people actually make up 13% of the US eligible voters population, they're really important because they break so heavily in favor of the Democratic candidate. Of course, in the 2024 race, we've seen Donald Trump making big inroads into minority voters, in particular Latino, but into black people as well. And so now I want to bring you to these CNN polls that was released in the last few days and was taken into the seven big battleground states. When you look at Georgia and Pennsylvania, and look in particular in Georgia, big black population here, you see the Harris share vote between black voters is a little bit down, and Georgia 84 and Pennsylvania 85, but again not so much, as only 3 points from 2020. The really alarm bell for Harris, the really red flag, I think is really those two numbers, 61% and 56% respectively in Georgia and Pennsylvania, of black voters that say they are really extremely motivated to vote. And this compares with 70% in Georgia and 72% in Pennsylvania of white voters that affirm that they are really energized and they want to vote. This is something to take into account, all right? Before Harris came along, the election trend against Biden and Trump really everybody thought that the higher the turnout, the better for Trump, because really the Biden base was lackluster and actually the Trump mega base were really energized. Of course, when Harris came and when Harris really took over Biden at the top of the ticket, she energized her base, the Democratic Party base. But when you look at those margins here and those numbers, I think it's really important that she is able to turn out black people. If black people don't turn out, then in states like Georgia, it may become difficult for her to overcome and to offset all those rural white states that will come for Trump in the small and white counties. For concerned Latino votes, here again, other interesting numbers from the CNN polls in Nevada and Arizona. Nevada and Arizona are two big Latino states, and as you can see here, in Nevada, Latino actually break 57 to 37 for Harris, which is only a 20 points margin of difference. And again, in Arizona, again, taking those polls with a pinch of salt, just 49 to 43. This means that the race is really close, and in particular, it's really much closer than it was in 2020, where Biden carried on with a margin of 33%. I've seen really in recent years polling, again, overestimating Republican support with black people and Latino voters. When actually election day gets closer, I think that many Latinos and many black will come back to the base. I think that the important question will not be much on the margin of which Harris will win those categories, but whether those categories actually turn out and go to vote for her. So looking back at the model, we're seeing here, we have the first score, which is a diversity score. A diversity score right here accounts for whether a state is white and whether a state is diverse, all right? The important thing to notice here, just to tell you how the model works out, is that of course there are some states, in particular all of states. If a state have a big Latino population or a big black population, you see that the other population is really small, right? You won't see a state with a bigger than the nation Latino population and a bigger than the nation black population. So when you're looking here, for example, red and positive means Republican, and negative and blue means Democrat. For example, in the state of California, California has a -7 Latino population score, which means that a big Latino population will advantage Democrat. Of course, you have big Latino population, and so you can't have a big black population. So when you're looking only at the black population, you just have a 2.5 score in favor, which is a favoring Republican. Of course, diversity in California favors Democrat, and when you're looking at this plus 2.5, this cannot be really taken into account by the model. So the thing is, when those Latino population score, black population score, and even other population score don't agree between one is blue and the other is red, it's because really the blue one actually dragged the other one down into the red category. So the models understand this, and when, for example, in the state of California, we have a blue Latino population score and a black population score, the blue score actually have the upper hand, and this really score of 2.5 doesn't really tamper into the diversity score. So of course, diversity score, it makes up a big one of the 4 pillars of fundamentals, which is of course ethnicity score, as you can see right here. Then the second big mainstay is society score. So society score actually takes into account two main things: the over 65 population and a religiosity score, so people that go to church and people that say in polls that they go to church always or seldom or never. So let's start off with the over 65 population score. Of course, whether the state population is old or young plays much really into whether the state is Democrat or Republican. This is simply explainable here in the CNN 2020 exit polls. Again, you see that when 18, 29 years old and 30, 44 years old tend to vote in favor of Democrat, they tend to be more progressive, more liberal, more actually forward-looking, so they look into the future, and so the message of hope of the Democrat Party may actually resonate them with young people. Again, as people grow older, for example, 45 here, more than 45, they tend to vote for Trump and for Republicans. This may be because of the fact that they become more concentrated and more focused on the economy, on inflation, on immigration. So again, they vote for Republicans. There was some speculation with Biden on the ticket that actually his expertise and his old age would actually have helped him here in the Rust Belt state of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, in particular here in Wisconsin and Michigan, because of his past of because of his appeal, really, with older voters that we maybe were blue collar workers up here. But with Kamala Harris on the ticket and a young age, I believe that her age may be actually a caveat here in the upper Midwest states, but while of course it will be a big advantage here, in particular the state of Georgia and in the state of Arizona. They are pretty young, and of course those states have really lost weight into the electoral college. They lost electoral votes, big depression, big depopulation right here. So again, looking back at our society score, when you're looking at over 65 population, again, negative is Democrat, positive is Republican. Then the other big thing that makes up the society score is religiosity score. Again, you may argue, why am I looking at whether people believe in God and go to church? Well, there are some simple answers, and the easiest for us to take a look at is really, again, 2020 CNN exit polls. When you look at here, for example, first thing, marital status, all right? We're not saying that all married people go to church, and we're not saying that all not married people don't go to church. But of course, if you're married, you have a family, so maybe on Sunday morning you go to church, right? Maybe if you're not married, you may be less likely to do so. And again, the partisan lean is clear, right? Married people do favor Trump, not married people do favor Democrats in general. To be even more precise, you go down here and you look at the religion part, alright? So you're looking at religion, again, 43% of US eligible voters here are Protestant or other Christian, and we're looking into this category, 60% for Trump. This was really important, like here in the Iowa region, here in the upper Midwest. Iowa is a state which is very evangelical. It was really important for Trump to actually really rally his base here in the 2024 caucuses, here back in February, here back in January, and so this is really important for Trump. He struggled once with those voters back in the 2016 campaign. Those voters actually tended to beware of him, maybe because he wasn't really a church guy, right? He was a big multinational rich person that would really struggle at the beginning of the race to make inroads with those people. Many evangelicals actually voted for Senator Ted Cruz from Texas in the 2016 campaign, but then Trump picked Governor Mike Pence from Indiana. It was a big voice for evangelical voters, and it actually was a very political move by Donald Trump to actually try to win over the evangelical voters that were one of his biggest strengths in the 2024 primary cycle. Again, if you look at the battleground state right here, the state of the upper Midwest are really the less religious state, the state of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, while in the South, of course, they are way more religious. This may have something to do with the issue of abortion. So you're looking at Democrats really playing into the issue of abortion. In those states, the message may really resonate. In those states, a little bit less, right? Let's take a look at pure number here when we're talking about religiosity. Georgia is really religious, almost 5.5 points religiosity score. But when you look, for example, here in the state of Michigan, yes, Michigan is really 1.1, so a little bit Republican, but not that much. And again, if you look down here, in particular in the state of Wisconsin, right here, again, 1.6, so not so much, right? Again, also in Pennsylvania, those are numbers that are really nothing comparable to those states. For example, here in North Carolina, again, 5.56 for Democrats, for Republicans. And of course, this may play into the society score, right? When you look at the society score right here, again, the state of Arizona has a relative Republican society score. The state of Georgia is a big society score. Again, you've seen that there was a big 5.5 older religiosity score for Georgia. It actually got a 1.1. That's because Georgia is very young, so young population actually made that up, all right, when you're talking about society score. And of course, when you go here in Michigan, again, it's really the same. Michigan, not really religious, but very old, so it gets more Republican. And when you go down here in the state of North Carolina, for example, we're talking about the battleground. Again, North Carolina is, yes, it's religious, and it's not as young as Georgia. It's a little bit older, and you can see this 3.016. All right, so take this into account. Remember, when we're talking about how North Carolina can be a big swing state, can actually be inside into a Democrat's column. All right, yes, it's true, but it's very, very not as young as Georgia. So keep that into account when you're talking about whether North Carolina will vote to the right or the left of Georgia. For example, just like here, Ohio, around 2 points. 2 points is a lot, right? When you're talking about 2 points, those are scores that are really, really centered at 0, and to get to 2, it takes to be heavily leaned, all right? So we're talking about 2 points. Don't think it to be, 2 points is nothing. No, 2 points is a lot, right? For example, when you look at here, a 1.9, that's really close to 2, actually translates to a projected margin of 12 points of victory. So to get to 2 points, it takes a lot. So imagine what it takes to get to 5 points when you're talking about religiosity score. Again, Pennsylvania, not religious, but really old, so 2.659. And again, Wisconsin is a little bit less than Pennsylvania, but really not religious and really not old, really not young. So now let's dive into the third category, which is education score. So education score actually takes into account 2 main pillars. And those are the urban population score and educational attainment score. So let's start with the urban population score. This is really not a mystery that Republicans tend to fare very well with rural areas, and Democrats are really strong with high density population areas and in cities and suburbs. So again, if you look at the map right here, it's really clear that the Republicans are really good here in the Great Plains region, in the west and in the south, big low density population areas and rural areas, while those Democrat strongholds in the west coast and the south and in the east coast are really urban population with big cities and settlements right here. So now we're going to take a look at the very swing states, starting from here in Arizona and Nevada in the southwest. So you see that those states are really urban, all right? The state of Arizona with the Maricopa County, fast-growing county. Again, the urban population right here is really able to offset all those other rural counties right here in the state. You see Biden was able to win Maricopa County by just 3 points, but then won the state despite all those other red right here. And also the state of Nevada, very urban, of course, with Clark County, the home of Las Vegas, make Nevada a really urban state. Again, if you look at the score right here, you can see Arizona is a minus 1.785 and Nevada down here minus 206. So big urban population on this side favoring Democrats. Then if you look at the southeast, the states of Georgia and North Carolina, really, despite having some big urban areas like, for example, here, Atlanta and its suburbs, those states are really more rural than the other states that we just seen. There is much more red here. There's small but important rural white counties right here, and also in the state of North Carolina, despite having the so-called tech triangles here with the cities of Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. Again, if you look at here, there's a big rural population, and if you go in the land here, big rural population, white population, small counties but really important. And again, if you look here at the score, the state of Georgia, you can see, is actually a positive 1.1 score, which means that it's slightly rural. And if you go down here in the state of North Carolina, a whopping 2.5 score for North Carolina. So, of course, when you look at those numbers, it looks like Democrats are favored in the southwest and Republicans are favored in the southeast. But you need to take into account that those numbers are really offset by the society score and the diversity score. Of course, Georgia and North Carolina are more rural than Arizona and Nevada, and that would make them more Republican, but they're also way younger and way more diverse. Alright, in Georgia and North Carolina, population is really younger and it's really more black and more diverse than it is in Arizona and Nevada, despite the kind of fairly big presence here of Latino population. But again, in Georgia and North Carolina, the diversity is even bigger and even more important to take into account. So you have those society score and diversity score favoring Democrats right here, but of course the urban education or urban population score actually favoring Republicans here over here. So you see that actually those things kind of offset each other, and this is why you understand, for example, the state of Arizona and Georgia were actually so close in the 2020 election. Those actually different indicators actually match each other and offset each other and make those states really, for different reasons, but really close to each other. Then, if you look at the Midwestern states, you see that the most rural state of the three, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, is really the state of Wisconsin, with a positive 2.476 in favor of Republicans. So it's really rural state in the state of Wisconsin. Then you have in the middle way, you have the state of Michigan, rural but not so rural, with a positive 1.247. And the state of Pennsylvania right here with just a 0.672 score in favor of the rural side, so in favor of Republicans. Of course, when you look at the map, this makes sense. In the state of Pennsylvania, you got here two important urban centers, the Philadelphia area and its suburbs right here with high density population, and the city of Pittsburgh here in Allegheny County on the west. Then if you go to Michigan, really you have just the big city of Detroit, and again some here urban population in Grand Rapids, but again you see that this is a bit more rural state than Pennsylvania, and again don't forget about this all rural area, the rural area up here with big red presence. And when you look at the state of Wisconsin, you really understand why the state of Wisconsin is fundamentally so red. The state of Wisconsin, and just here, down here with Madison and Milwaukee, here to the University of Wisconsin-Dane County, but really it's not so urban compared to all these rural white counties here that are really not so poorly populated, right? There are a fairly percentage of population here in the rural counties. Actually, when you look at the state of Wisconsin, the only demographic that actually tend to favor Democrats, also compared to the other Rust Belt states, is the religiosity score. Alright, Wisconsin is the least religious of those states. This may, of course, play into the issue of abortion. But then all the other demographics here in the state of Wisconsin are really favorable for Republic, are really pointing towards Republicans. Alright, this is a white state, rural state, and all state, and then we'll see what's next to come with education and the economy score. But again, really, the state of Wisconsin is again kind of drifting away from the Democratic Party and actually looking closer, demographically speaking, to the states of Iowa and Ohio, and those Midwestern states that has recently shifted to the right in a heavy way. So here we wrapped up with the urban population score, and now we get to the educational attainment score. The educational attainment, again, is a really important parameter. The educational gap widens in the country. Actually, when you look at exit poll, for example, here in the 2012 presidential election between Obama and Romney, you see that really, actually, college educated tended to favor the Republican candidate, and non-college educated, like, for example, blue-collar workers, or again, people affiliated with unions, tending to vote for Republican, for Democrats, actually. Then Donald Trump came over and really made some inroads into those workers, the auto workers industry, electors, the blue collar voters, and so the educational gap has widened. All right. Again, look at the 2024 presidential election polls that was carried out by CNN. You can see right here in the state of Pennsylvania, Harris wins the four-year college educated graduates by 59 to 37, which is a big educational gap. Again, if you look at an educational score right here in the state of Pennsylvania, in the Rust Belt, you see that really in the state of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is really not educated and not educated, right? Really close to zero, actually a little bit more educated than the nation. Again, this is just something to do with the urban population score, all right? You look at Pennsylvania, so this is the most educated of the Rust Belt trio. When you look at Michigan, again, you see Michigan is not really educated, all right? This is something to do with the big presence of auto workers, blue-collar workers right here. And the state of Wisconsin, again, not educated, 0.838. So a little bit smaller than the state in the score here in Michigan, but again, not so educated. What's interesting here, actually, from CNN polls, is what they found out in the state of Georgia. Surprisingly, they found out in the state of Georgia, college graduates actually split 65 to 42 to 32 in favor of Trump. This is something that has to do, of course, with the historical trends of the state of Georgia. All right, the state of Georgia was a heavily conservative state, a big evangelical state. So really, the Republican Party produced some kind of white establishment in the past years. All right. So when you look at Republicans, you think like the Republican, the Family Party, the Bush Republicans, what like Trump calls rhinos. But we're talking about those more traditional Republicans, those more suburbs, the more high-income families, those businesses that tend to vote Republican, tend to vote Republican in the past, and were really fervent Bush-Romney supporters. Very different right here from the actually Republican electorate up here in the Midwest, where we're talking about blue-collar workers. So we can say that right here in the Midwest, when Republican made inroads into the non-college educated people, blue-collar workers, the educational gap actually widened with actually college-educated people voting more in favor of progressive and liberal policies. While right here in the state of Georgia, the gap is more to be found along really ethnical lines. So we're talking about black and white rather than on educational line, with white people generally voting more Republicans regardless of their education status because of really a historical trend and historical holdover. So we're talking about really an establishment that was produced right here by the Republican Party, the more traditional Republican Party. We're talking about evangelical voters that really were the spine of Republican victories right here in the South before the Clinton-Biden era, but actually in the state of Georgia, for example, both Bush and Romney won by comfortable margins. So, but again, when you look at the score in those southern states, you see that really the state of Georgia is really, again, like Pennsylvania, there isn't such a big difference whether it's educated or not educated. We're talking about really in line to the nation. The state of Arizona is actually a little bit less educated, with 0.7. Despite a big growing population, it remains not so educated. And when you look down to finish with Nevada and North Carolina, you see that Nevada is really not educated, right? Nevada, this is something that makes Nevada, again, a pick-up opportunity for Republicans. Along with Latino voters shifting in favor of Republicans, you see that Nevada, despite being very urban, is really not educated. And this may help in this year Donald Trump making inroads with disaffected non-college educated workers that complain about the economy, that they think the economy is not working well for them, that are really paying the price of inflation. And again, of course, in North Carolina, again, really educational gap we see here is not really important. It's not really to take into account because it's really in line with the nation. So our final indicator is what is called the economy score. So the economy score, as you can see right here, is really made up of two important factors. There are median household income and union membership score. Alright, so starting with the union membership score, this is really important to assess how blue collars workers trend to vote. Alright, so unions generally tend to help drive voters into the Democratic column. They used to do so in the Midwestern states in the Obama era. And so let's see how this thing play up. So of course, in the southern states, unions are not so rooted tradition. So state of Arizona, there is no really union whatsoever. In the state of Georgia, again, plus 4.7 in favor of Republicans. So you mean that the really situation when you're talking about even educational gap, you can understand now why this is really. The fact is that economically, the southern states are really different. We're not talking about blue collar workers, we're talking about a different kind of economy, a more business based economy, a more growing economy. So we're talking about really population that trying to vote that really favor Republican based on the economy, based on free market principle. We're talking about some kind of past fashion Republican Party, the Bush kind of Republican Party, the Reagan Republican Party, the Romney Republican Party. And this also helps you understand why we are in those states, white college educated people tend to vote Republicans, because really the issues in those states is really about the economy, really about growing business, is really about letting the state out of people's business, really about a state that really let people grow their businesses. And also with rural counties, we're talking about deregulation, we're talking about landowners, we're talking about policies that help the economy thrive for those people. So really that explains to you all those things together. Then again, the other two southern states, the state of Nevada, actually has a bigger margin here of union workers. We have a minus by 1.1. Again, this is up to the question on the election will be how many of these workers were Trump able to actually win over in the election. But again, you see that in Nevada, the score favors really closely, really slightly Democrats, and of course in North Carolina a big 6.0 in favor of Democrats. So this big economic score, big union score in favor of Republicans in those southern states, apart from Nevada. When you're looking at the Midwest states, of course, you expect the union score to be much higher, and it is in particular in the state of Pennsylvania. We got a minus 2.3 in favor of Democrats, so a big union presence here. And again, in Michigan, really important with the auto union, really can they scrambling to gain their support. But again, generally speaking, union is an indicator that tends to align with Democrat priorities and tend to favor Democrats. But look at here in the state of Wisconsin, right? The state of Wisconsin is a really score of Republicans 2.437, which means that actually Republicans are favored when it comes to union membership score. Why is that? So, first reason is because Wisconsin is way more rural. It was mainly rural, so the issues are different, and so we have, of course, less people working in factories that need union, for example, in comparison to the state of Michigan, to take into account, for instance. But the second important thing is a 2011 reform passed by Republican Governor Scott Walker, which actually was called Act 10, which actually weakened union and weakened the power of workers to unionize. And those kind of things actually weakened the union and may have played a role in the 2016 Trump victory here, and an aggressive shift in the blue-collar workers in those states. So this is something to take into account. Again, Wisconsin used to be a very big union state, and now is really a Republican-leaning state for what concerns the percentage of workers that belong to a union and the clout that union can really exert when it comes to election. To finish with, we have the income score. So again, in the past, the division was somewhat clearer, with really low-income families, maybe working family, tending to vote for Democrat, and high-income families, businessmen, and people that really need and low-tax economy favoring Republicans. Again, in the recent years, the situation has shifted, and when you look at county and state, you really understand that with the median household income, when you take those parameters into account, if the median income is lower than the nation, the states tend to favor Republicans, and if it's higher, they tend to favor Democrats. So this may be for different reasons. One reason may be that if people are more well off, they may be more prone to more taxes, or maybe they are more concentrated and more focused on other issues, like, for example, on social issues and more liberal progressive issues. While people that are really struggling to get by, they are really more interested in really more pragmatic issues. They're really more interested in the economy. That is issues that Republicans tend to play up more than Democrats, and they may be more interested about migrations, inflation, of course, because they can't afford groceries, and also migration, because maybe they think that migration is something that may impinge upon their ability to actually afford groceries and food. So these are really the issues at stake with economy. So, and another thing is really the urban and rural divide. Of course, urban wages tend to be higher, alright? If you live in New York, if you live in Los Angeles, you're way more likely to make much more money than if you live in a rural county in Kansas, alright? So these are also other things to take into account. So for what concerns the income score right here, we have the state of Arizona, which is again 0.08, so it's likely favoring Republicans, but by a margin that is really not really significant. The state of Georgia, a little bit more Republican, 0.52. So economically, we see that those southern states tend to be more Republican. We're seeing rural states, so low taxes, low regulations, and really business states, right? Rather than the working class state up in the Midwest. So it makes sense that those southern states, economically speaking, favor Republicans. And then down here, for example, here in the state of Nevada, again, you see slightly favoring Republicans, and the other southern state, North Carolina, again, we're talking about slight margins, but really narrowly favoring Republicans in the economic score. Now let's take a look at the Rust Belt state. For example, in Michigan, you can see Michigan, the race is really close, right? Just 0.23, so really a tie. While, for example, the state of Minnesota favors, economically speaking, Democrat with a negative score of 0.57. The state of Pennsylvania, again, really close to the tie, 0.13. And the state of Wisconsin, again, 0.09. So economically speaking, those states all slightly favor Republicans by the margin that are really neglectable, apart from some states in the South, for example, North Carolina, where they are a little bit more in favor of Republicans. So when you account for those scores, of course, you need the model actually adjusts the scores, adjusts the impact of those parameters according to past election, according to regression. It fits a regression to account to really understand how those things will actually play into the election, to neglect things that may be really outliers, or that really may really play into the actual outcome of the election. And it returns fundamental number 1, fundamental number 2. Fundamental number 1 is a combination of ethnicity and society score. They are really more close together. And fundamental number 2, it really is a combination of education score and economic score. It returns then a fundamental score, a fundamental based margins, and fundamental based odds of victory for each candidate. Here it uses really a probability distribution using both the normal distribution and a Cauchy distribution, which is a fat tail distribution, which is really better in those cases because it has a fat tail, so it accounts for really or unexpected events that may happen in election with a higher frequencies than on a normal distribution scale. Again, this is technicism, you don't need to know that. The important thing is try to see how, based on fundamentals, the swing states are going to vote. So look at here, Arizona, we're talking about, again, a statistical tie, a margin of minus 1.2, so Harris wins by 1.2. Again, it's under 60%, so it is a statistical tie. When you look at Georgia, really, younger population and more diverse population make Georgia a little bit to the left of Arizona, and the projected margin is minus 2.3, with a probability associated slightly more than 64.4%. Then you look down here in the state of Michigan, right here. The state of Michigan, again, when you look at the economy, when you look at the rural population, the white population here in Michigan, you really understand that Michigan is slightly favoring Republicans, right? So we're talking about a 3.2 point favor of Trump with an associated probability of around 70%. This really reflects and mirrors the trend, the trend shifting in Michigan. Michigan really trending to the right. It voted in Obama years, and now it's voting for Democrat. And in fundamentals, you really understand why. So we're talking about an old population, a rural population, and a white population, and also an economically population that doesn't favor Democrats in a very important way. As you can see here, Michigan is a fundamental number 2, so we're talking about education and economy that only favor Democrat by around 0.2%. Down here in North Carolina and Nevada actually with a big Latino population that really is projected to vote in November more Democrat than expected now in polls, is more Democrat than expected, right? When you look here, fundamental number 1 as a minus 2.3 in favor of Democrat for its diversity here in Nevada. The economic score favors Republican, but not by such a big margin. And really, if you account only for fundamentals here in Nevada, you just have a 7 margin in favor of Harris. Again, Nevada is a fundamentally Democratic state, but this does not mean that Republicans cannot take it in November. In particular, when you look at voting trend and patterns, you understand that these margins is really going to winnow down. But in next videos, North Carolina is way more Republican than Georgia. We're talking about what? More rural and more rural again, and extremely more religious and less black. So again, favor Trump by 8.6 trend. But again, when you're talking about voting trends, when you're talking about big growing population, the margin are going to be close, all right? This is something that you need to account later. That, of course, you cannot count right now. Voting trend is something that the model does later on. And again, the other two states, the state of Pennsylvania, is again slightly favored for Democrat, is an old population, a bit of religious population here, right here, and a white population. Economically is a little bit more Democrat, but and also count for education and urban score, but it doesn't make up in the fundamental score. And when you're talking about Wisconsin, of course, we understood why Wisconsin has such a big red fundamental score here. Wisconsin is fundamentally red state, which are actually having, fundamentally speaking, a 92% chance of winning Wisconsin. Again, of course, what the model does is taking into account a bunch of other data. In particular, we're talking about polls and we're talking about voting trends. So really understanding how voting polls trend and change in election. This is something fundamentals don't do. Fundamentals provide a snapshot, all right? It's still a snapshot of the state of the race. What the model does, of course, is accounting for polls and voting trends that provide a dynamic snapshot of the race. It then accounts all those data together, and so it returns the projection. This is, of course, one of the main features that our model takes into account. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please be free to comment in the section down below. And please like the video if you really liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you want to know more about how the model works. And stay tuned for next video when we're talking about We are unraveling other parts of the model. We're going to see how the model actually will change its final projection once new data comes in. We're talking about new polls after Labor Day. See you next time on Race to the White House election forecast.